They thought the SOS was lost. Until the Deathworlders arrived Sci-Fi HFY universe, the signal drifted for 43 years through dark interstellar oceans, a frail whisper of desperation swallowed by dust clouds, rogue comets, and the silent gravity of forgotten stars. It was a simple SOS, coded in an old human format no alien had bothered to archive. The galaxy assumed the message was lost. Or irrelevant. Or both. They were wrong, because the ones who sent it were still alive. And the ones who received it were Deathworlders. The story begins on a small research outpost named Horizon 6, orbiting an unnamed blue dwarf star on the far edge of mapped space. Horizon 6 was never meant to be important. It was a scientific footnote, a lonely metal ring drifting above a nameless rock. But the scientists stationed there knew something the greater galaxy didn't. Humanity had been watching the borders of the Orion expanse for years, waiting for something to emerge. They expected anomalies. They expected strange particles, new life forms, maybe even another dead civilization. They didn't expect a living one begging for help. When the SOS was finally untangled from cosmic noise, its contents chilled the room. A distorted voice from an ancient pre-FTL species. A species the galaxy had labeled extinct centuries ago. A species that had once touched the stars, only to be hunted and burned by a conquering empire known as the VYRR Dominion. The signal begged for salvation that never came. Until now, humanity heard it. And humanity answered. A single human vessel was dispatched, not a warship, not a diplomatic cruiser, but the long-range expedition carrier Atlas Ascendant. It was a ship built for dangerous worlds, a ship that carried the scars of storms, volcanic skies, and oceans of methane. Its crew was equally hardened, explorers, xenobiologists, engineers, soldiers who had learned the rhythm of survival on planets that broke lesser species. When they reached the expanse, they found a ruined world hanging in orbit like a corpse. Once green, now gray. Once alive, now hollow. But under the ash, under the collapsed cities, under the mountains cracked open by bombardment, life still moved. Weak. Dying. But alive. The survivors were the Thalari, thin-boned, pallid creatures with luminous eyes shaped by low-gravity evolution. They feared the humans at first. Every species did. Humanity carried a reputation carved from the worlds they had tamed. Aggressive planets created aggressive adaptability. Deathworlders, they were called. Hostile by necessity, unbreakable by design, yet the Thalari's fear softened when a human medic knelt beside a trembling child and offered water with shaking hands. When human engineers began restoring the shattered life support towers using scrap and stubbornness. When human marines stood guard through the night, watching the skies for predators, humanity did not bring conquest. They brought compassion sharpened by hardship. For 3 weeks they worked in silence among ruins haunted by echoes. They restored power. They built shelters. They stabilized atmosphere shields. They learned the Thalari language not through translators, but through patience, gestures, shared small moments. And for the first time in generations, the survivors began to hope. But the VYRR Dominion still ruled this region of space. And they did not tolerate hope. The invasion fleet arrived without warning, 30 warships darkening the horizon like a mechanical eclipse. They expected to find a dead species clinging to dust. Instead they found Deathworlders repairing what the Dominion thought was broken forever. The VYRR demanded surrender. Humanity refused. The first strike hit the surface with the force of a falling moon. The ground cracked open, dust rising in a black plume that blotted out the sun. The Atlas Ascendant's shields barely held, sparking and screaming under the bombardment. But humans had endured worse storms. Worse odds. Worse nights. The Marines established defensive positions around the Thalari shelters. Portable shields flickered to life, blue arcs slicing the ruin-lit air. Drones swarmed upward, their cameras tracking every movement in the sky. The humans had come to save lives. But they were prepared to fight for them. the VYRR unleashed their ground troops, hulking creatures encased in plates of living armor. They marched with the confidence of an empire that had never known defeat. They were about to learn. Human soldiers moved with a different rhythm than the VYRR had ever seen. They fought like creatures forged in hostile ecosystems, quick, adaptive, inventive. They used the environment itself as a weapon, collapsing weakened buildings onto enemy lines, rerouting broken power grids to create electric traps, igniting pockets of old industrial fuel to split the battlefield in blazing walls of fire. The Thalari watched from their shelters, stunned. This was not simple warfare. It was survival elevated to art, but the VYRR were relentless. They pushed forward with crushing numbers and overwhelming firepower. Slowly, inch by inch, the human lines bent. Shields failed. Drones fell. The Atlas Ascendant, unable to take flight under sustained bombardment, sank closer to catastrophic failure, and then, in the darkest hour, humanity revealed why the galaxy whispered their name with equal parts awe and fear. A single human commander pressed a hand against the cracked hull, listening to the groaning metal with the familiarity of an old friend. The ship responded. Systems flickered. Engines, long dormant, began to glow with the fury of a rising star. The Atlas Ascendant wasn't just a vessel. It was a veteran of 1,000 dangers. And like its crew, it refused to die quietly. The ship rose, slowly, painfully, fire bleeding from ruptured vents. It climbed into the smoke-choked sky and turned its scarred frame toward the VYRR flagship. No one on the battlefield could look away. Even the VYRR hesitated at the sight of a dying human ship choosing attack over retreat. The Ascendant charged, plasma beams carved through the void. Missile bays burst open like the wings of a burning angel. The ship became a spear of iron and fury, ramming straight into the Dominion's command vessel in a collision that shook the clouds themselves. 2 Titans fell from the sky in a spiral of fire. On the ground, the humans surged forward with renewed ferocity. The Thalari, seeing their saviors bleed for them, joined the battle with improvised weapons and sheer desperation. Together, they forced the VYRR to retreat. The Dominion withdrew in disbelief, leaving behind wreckage, scorched earth, and a world that refused to die. When dawn returned, the ruins glowed gold under the rising sun. The few remaining systems aboard the Atlas Ascendant flickered weakly, then stabilized. The ship had survived the impossible. Just like its crew. Just like the Thalari, the survivors gathered before the ship as the human commander stepped out. Armor cracked, uniform torn, but standing tall. There were no speeches. No declarations. Just a quiet, shared understanding. The Dominion had tried to erase a species, humanity had answered that call, and the galaxy would never forget what happened here. The SOS had not been lost. It had found the only ones who would cross the void for strangers. Even if it meant defying an empire, the humans helped rebuild the world piece by piece, stronger and brighter than before. And as the Thalari learned to stand again, they adopted a new word into their language, one they used with reverence, with gratitude, with awe. Deathworlder, not a monster, not a conqueror, a protector no star could silence. And so the story ends with a truth carved into the heart of a once dead world, and in the deep silence after war, the galaxy learned what it meant to be saved by humans. The first dawn after the invasion was strangely gentle, as if the broken world itself was holding its breath. Pale light crept across shattered towers and collapsed bridges, revealing the scars left by fire and falling metal. Smoke drifted upward in thin, ghost-like ribbons. The ground was still warm in places. The air still tasted faintly of ozone and ash. The surviving humans walked through the ruins with slow, deliberate steps, checking for heat pockets, structural collapses, and any remnants of VYRR sabotage. They moved like people accustomed to disaster zones, calm, methodical, efficient. Deathworlders did not panic after a battle. They planned the next step. The Thalari watched them from makeshift shelters, whispering among themselves in soft, bell-like tones. Their bodies were fragile, almost translucent in the new sun. Most had never seen a ship larger than a transport, never seen a soldier in full armor, never seen a species willing to bleed for them, yet here humans stood, patching wounds on strangers as if tending to their own children. One Thalari elder approached cautiously, leaning on a splintered staff. He touched a human engineer's arm with trembling fingers, marveling at the warmth. The solidity. Humans were heavier than the Thalari, their bones denser, their muscles thicker, their hearts beating with a slow, forceful rhythm the Thalari could feel through touch. To the elder, they seemed carved from the dangerous worlds they'd come from, creatures made strong by endless storms. But strength wasn't what surprised him, it was gentleness. The human medic kneeling beside a wounded Thalari child moved with near reverence, whispering soothing nonsense while fixing a cracked breathing mask. Another human shared ration bars with a cluster of survivors, explaining through gestures how to eat them slowly so their weak stomachs wouldn't rebel. A marine carried 3 Thalari at once across a field of debris. Refusing to let them walk on sharp metal fragments, the elder realized then that the galaxy had misunderstood these beings. They were not feared because they were monstrous. They were feared because they cared too fiercely. High above them, sparks still flickered from the Atlas Ascendant's hull. Emergency drones buzzed around the ship, cutting away twisted plating and sealing ruptures. The vessel hovered on its fractured repulsors like a wounded animal unwilling to lie down. Every creak, every groan sounded like stubborn refusal. Inside, technicians argued softly about power routing and stabilizer loads, while the captain monitored long-range scans with bloodshot eyes. The Dominion would return, they always did. Empires hated unfinished wars. The humans had bought time, but not safety. The captain stepped outside onto the open ramp where the wind carried the distant cries of recovering Thalari. He watched the survivors gathering around a collapsed monument, clearing rubble with their delicate hands. A thought settled in his chest like a stone. This wasn't just a rescue anymore, it was a responsibility. Meanwhile, at the far edge of the ruins, a human scout team uncovered something unexpected buried beneath layers of ash, a Thalari archive sphere. It was cracked but intact, the last surviving memory vault of their culture. Stories, histories, star maps, gene records, songs. All preserved in shimmering crystalline filaments. When the Thalari saw it, many fell to their knees. It was as if a piece of their lost people had been returned from death. The humans didn't fully understand the emotional weight of it, but they felt it. Deathworlders often did. Hard lives taught them to respect anything that kept a species alive: memory, hope, resilience. The medic carried the sphere to the Thalari with both hands, as if holding a newborn. No human said a word. They didn't need to, and for the first time since the SOS was sent 43 years ago. The Thalari let themselves believe that their story wasn't ending, it was beginning again, because someone had come for them, because humanity had crossed the void to answer a cry no one else cared to hear. A cry that had landed in the hands of the only species stubborn enough to respond, the Deathworlders. The VYRR Dominion fleet had not abandoned the region. Somewhere beyond the haze of broken clouds, their warships waited, engines idling like predators in the dark. The humans and Thalari could feel the tension in the air, subtle vibrations through the crusted ground, the faint hum of distant grav drives. The Dominion had learned that one battle did not a victory make. They were coming back with everything they had. Human engineers and marines worked in tandem to prepare. Makeshift defenses rose from rubble, energy shields scavenged from broken drones, plasma turrets reassembled from fragments. Tripwire traps weaving the landscape like scars of warning. Every soldier moved with purpose, every hand steady, every breath measured. They did not fight for conquest. They fought for survival, for life, for the right of a species to continue. Above them, the Atlas Ascendant hummed, slowly recovering from the collision with the VYRR flagship. Its damaged hull reflected the orange light of the planet's twin suns, battered but unbowed. Human pilots climbed into half-repaired fighters, checking systems with precise, practiced motions. Each knew the odds were against them. Each knew the Dominion had not yet learned fear, but fear would teach them. The first wave of Dominion assault ships descended like dark meteors. Their weapons glinted, feeding on the chaos below. But the humans were ready. Drones lifted into the sky in precise formations, scattering the first volley. Turrets fired in rhythmic sequences, their beams slicing through enemy hulls. Debris tumbled in slow-motion arcs, colliding with enemy craft in a deadly ballet of metal and fire. The Thalari watched from behind reinforced shelters, their luminous eyes reflecting sparks and plasma trails. They had never seen war fought like this. They had never seen humans wielding the environment itself as a weapon, turning collapsed buildings into crushing traps, igniting industrial fuel caches to carve paths of fire, and coordinating attacks with a precision born of experience on worlds where every mistake meant death. The Dominion ground forces struck next, armored colossi stepping through broken streets, their heavy footsteps cracking the soil. Their shields flared against human fire, but the soldiers adapted instantly, deploying decoy holograms, rerouting energy grids into improvised electrified traps, collapsing weakened structures onto advancing lines. Each Dominion unit that fell sent shockwaves through their ranks. Confusion grew, panic spread. They had never faced an enemy that anticipated, adapted, and fought with such relentless ingenuity. The humans pressed their advantage. Marines led squads through broken corridors, guiding Thalari survivors who picked up scavenged weapons with trembling hands. The bond between species deepened with every maneuver, every coordinated strike. Humanity's reputation as Deathworlders was not for show. They were adaptive, relentless, and impossibly resourceful. High above, the Atlas Ascendant made its final ascent. Sparks and smoke streamed from ruptured thrusters as the ship angled for a counterattack. On board, the captain scanned the battlefield, seeing both the desperation of their situation and the opening they needed. He pressed a hand to the ship's controls as if coaxing life from its wounded frame. Systems hummed, lights flickered, and the Ascendant roared back into motion, a scarred Leviathan ready to reclaim its dominance, from the ground. Humans and Thalari alike watched as the Ascendant turned toward the VYRR command ship, engines glowing like molten stars. The enemy paused, stunned by the audacity of a vessel that should have been a wreck, now charging like a spear through the void. Every human and every Thalari understood that the battle was no longer just about survival, it was about defiance, about sending a message across the stars that life could not be extinguished so easily. The first impact shattered the horizon. The Ascendant collided with the Dominion flagship, tearing through hull and energy barriers alike. Explosions rippled across the battlefield, throwing Dominion units into chaos. The humans surged forward with renewed fury. Thalari by their side, finally wielding their desperation as strength, and in that moment, the galaxy learned something new. When humanity answers a cry for help, the consequences echo across light years. The ground trembled long after the initial clash, as if the planet itself had absorbed the fury of the battle. Dust and smoke drifted in slow eddies, twisting through the ruins like ghosts of the fallen. The Thalari emerged cautiously from their shelters, their luminous eyes scanning the devastated streets. Where fear had ruled for generations, awe now took its place. The humans were still moving, wounded, tired, scorched, but unbowed. Every step they took spoke of endurance. Of a stubborn refusal to surrender. Ilara, the human commander, led her squad through the rubble, checking the survivors, distributing water, stabilizing injured Thalari. Her armor was scorched, one arm bandaged with makeshift wrappings, yet she moved with a certainty that belied her exhaustion. Each glance at her crew was a silent order: survive. Protect. Adapt. From the skies above, the Atlas Ascendant circled the battlefield like a wounded sentinel. Its hull bore scars from its collision with the Dominion flagship, but its energy cores glowed steadily, radiating a quiet defiance. Fighter drones buzzed like metallic swarms, patrolling the airspace, ready to intercept any reinforcements. The VYRR Dominion did not retreat quietly. Scouting skimmers darted along orbital paths, probing, testing defenses, searching for weaknesses. The humans anticipated each move, countering with traps, decoys, and guerrilla tactics perfected over lifetimes on worlds that had tried to kill them. Collapsed structures became choke points. Exposed wiring became electrified barriers. Explosives from old fuel silos became impromptu cannonades. The humans adapted the environment into an extension of their will. Amidst this chaos, the Thalari began to fight. Not with training, not with confidence, but with the raw desperation of a species clinging to life. They wielded salvaged weapons, launched improvised attacks, and followed the humans with a trust forged in fire and sweat. Together, they pushed back the Dominion skirmishers, reclaiming pockets of their world inch by inch, and then came the Ascendant's counterstrike. The ship unleashed a wave of plasma beams and kinetic projectiles, targeting the Dominion warships hovering above. Their formation shattered like glass, debris spiraling into orbit. The impact sent shockwaves across the battlefield, hurling Dominion troops into craters and scattering their vehicles like toys. Ilara paused atop a rubble-strewn hill, watching the skies ignite with fire and energy. The Thalari gathered beside her, trembling yet resolute. She placed a hand on the nearest survivor's shoulder. No words were needed. The message was clear: humanity had answered. They had crossed the void for a cry no one else would hear, and they would not leave until the Thalari had a chance to rise again. As the smoke cleared, the Dominion began a slow withdrawal, their forces fractured, their morale broken. Humans and Thalari alike advanced carefully, ensuring the survivors could reclaim what remained of their homes, and in the distance, the Atlas Ascendant glowed faintly against the darkening sky, a wounded guardian refusing to yield. Humanity had not only survived, they had protected. They had reclaimed hope from the ashes of despair. The galaxy had learned something essential that day: kindness. Courage and defiance could be a weapon stronger than any fleet, and somewhere in the silent ruins, a human whispered to a child, and the child understood: life, no matter how fragile, was worth every sacrifice. The Dominion retreat was slow, chaotic, and marked by panic. Their warships twisted through the upper atmosphere, engines glowing bright against the darkening sky, leaving trails of fire and smoke. On the ground, the surviving Dominion soldiers scrambled to regroup, but the humans and Thalari pressed forward, reclaiming every street, every ruined building, every fragment of their world. Ilara led the advance through the shattered city, every step measured, every movement purposeful. The Thalari followed closely, some clutching salvaged weapons, others carrying supplies, but all moved with a newfound confidence, emboldened by the humans' presence. In their eyes, awe and trust burned alongside fear. They were learning courage from species that had endured impossible worlds and come to answer their call. The humans scavenged Dominion technology wherever possible, turning enemy weapons and broken drones into tools of defense and reconstruction. Energy grids were rerouted to stabilize damaged habitats. Broken buildings were reinforced into shelters. Fields once scarred by fire became fortified encampments. Every ruin was a new opportunity, every obstacle a tool. Above them, the Atlas Ascendant hovered like a wounded guardian. Its hull still bore the scars of collision, but its energy cores pulsed steadily, projecting shields over key points, launching drone squads with precise coordination. Pilots maneuvered in perfect sync, weaving between debris and Dominion fire, striking weak points with surgical precision. The Thalari began to speak, their melodic voices hesitant at first, then stronger with each command repeated, each suggestion followed by action. Humans listened, adapted, and incorporated their ideas. In this unity, two species bound by desperation and resilience became something greater, cooperators in a survival ballet that no Dominion force could anticipate. The Dominion's rear guard faltered as humans and Thalari set traps along escape routes. Collapsing overpasses, electrified barricades, and improvised mines funneled their retreat into narrow, vulnerable paths. Humans struck with lightning precision, neutralizing threats without unnecessary loss, always mindful that the goal was survival and protection, not slaughter. By the time the last Dominion skimmers lifted off the horizon, the survivors had reclaimed their world. Streets once littered with fire and debris now bore human and Thalari footprints, side by side. Tent structures and temporary shelters were set up, signaling not just survival, but hope, a declaration that the Thalari would rise again. Elara surveyed the scene from the top of a collapsed observation tower. Her armor was scorched, her body bruised, but her posture was unbroken. Around her, humans checked on Thalary families, treated the wounded, and repaired essential systems. For the first time in decades, the planet seemed alive again. The Atlas Ascendant emitted a low hum, signaling status stabilization. Systems were recovering. Repairs were underway. And somewhere in the distance, a human pilot guided a Thalary child to watch a star rise, a small gesture, but one that spoke of the galaxy's unyielding promise. Humanity had crossed the void for a lost signal, had fought the unconquerable, and had returned hope to a species the Dominion had written off. They were not conquerors. They were protectors. They were Deathworlders, and the galaxy would never forget the day humans came answering a cry that no one else heard. The aftermath settled like a fragile dawn over the ravaged world. Smoke curled from collapsed towers, and the air still carried the acrid scent of spent energy and scorched metal. Yet amid the ruin, life moved cautiously forward. Humans and Thalary worked together, restoring essential systems, clearing debris, and stabilizing what remained of the planet's fragile ecosystem. Every repaired conduit, every cleared street, every salvaged tool was a declaration. They would endure. Elara walked among the survivors, inspecting the shelters and makeshift medical bays. Her armor was scorched, dented, and patched, but her posture remained steady, unwavering. Around her, human soldiers trained Thalary in basic combat, emergency repair, and survival techniques, not to conquer, but to empower. Every instruction, every gesture reinforced a truth both species would carry. Humanity fights not for dominance, but for the chance to see others rise. The Thalary began to reclaim their culture. Children ran through restored courtyards, their luminous eyes wide with curiosity rather than fear. Elders carefully retrieved artifacts and crystal archives, reverently handling the relics of their past. The humans observed, assisting when necessary, always respectful. Always patient. They understood that survival was not enough, hope had to be nurtured. Above them, the Atlas Ascendant floated, its hull scarred but functional, engines glowing faintly as energy grids hummed back to life. Repairs continued, conducted by human engineers and Thalary apprentices learning to integrate their technology. Drones patrolled the air, scanning for remnants of Dominion forces, ensuring that no surprise attack could undo what had been reclaimed. The Dominion would not return immediately. Their pride had been broken, their fleet scattered, their calculations proven dangerously flawed. But humanity did not rely on absence alone. Defensive structures were reinforced. Sensors calibrated, and patrols scheduled, because survival demanded foresight as much as courage. As the twin suns rose fully over the horizon, casting gold and crimson across ruined spires and makeshift shelters, Elara stood atop a stabilized observation tower. She looked out at the Thalary gathering in the central plaza, their glowing forms mingling with human figures in careful, deliberate unity. She allowed herself a brief moment of satisfaction, not triumph, not victory, but recognition of the sheer force of persistence. A Thalary child approached her, carrying a small fragment of crystal archive, a piece of history restored from the ruins. The child held it out silently. Elara accepted it, feeling the weight of generations in her hands. In that simple exchange, the bond between species was solidified, a promise written not in words, but in trust, resilience, and shared experience. The humans had answered a cry sent decades ago. They had crossed voids of time and space, defied an empire, and protected a species the galaxy had deemed lost. The Thalary would live, and in their survival, humanity's legacy was etched across the stars, a reminder that compassion and defiance together could reshape destinies. And in the quiet, as the planet's battered surface began to hum with life once more, one truth lingered in the air: the SOS had not been lost. It had found the only ones who would answer. And in the stillness that followed, the galaxy understood the power of a human heart.